What's up, Digidestins? This is Kyle D, better known as RideMyAvatar, and guess what we're going to be doing today? We're going to have a discussion video. Well, more of a fun one at that. So without further ado, let's dive to the video and talk about Bandai's biggest problems, apparently. I'm going to steal from, let's say, Albert here from Digimon Card Game TCG 2020 using this comment. I'm not out here trying to say the game's dead or is dying, but I'm curious about how players feel about the game so far. One question I want to know is, when did the game start feeling bad for you, or when did the game start going down a spiral for you, and why? I want to know feedback, that is all. So taking this comment from a viewer from a standpoint, I want to take this to a little bit more elaborate standing. So what do I mean by this? Well, we could look at the negatives and everything like that, but it's a lot of mixed feelings. To a lot of players, once Jesmon came out, especially on the Japanese side, they feel like their bans aren't hitting soon enough, while the player base here in the English side is like the deck gets hit almost like 2 weeks after the set sells, and then people are like, well, I just wasted all that money for nothing. And that's kind of what it's kind of in this mixed feeling of limbo that I noticed into one of the comments into that hey, it's okay to feel like, yeah, in JP I do feel like 3 to 4 sets straight of a toxic deck is not healthy. It is mind-boggling that it lasts that long. They should definitely, one, update the biggest problem and have the bans come a little bit more frequent, especially when the player base starts seeing the problem. The problem comes down to now bringing it back to the English side. Now we're looking at it as, oh, they hit it too early. Okay, I get this. Best of threes definitely changed things up. Jesmon didn't do well in best of 3, but in best of 1, he dominated. They hit him, they restricted him, they fixed up a lot of the other problems like Eosmon, that purple Eosmon rush style of play, definitely cleaned that up, and other stuff like that. When they finally hit it for us, we didn't get a real chance to really play with it, and I kind of get that. Like, we want to be able to test and see if the deck will actually survive, but lately they've hit Crossheart right off the bat, now Black War Greymon right off the bat, and I get it. There are times where a deck using statistics of JP or the Asian territories, because there are best of 3s in the Asian territory, that you have to take that into account. And then there are best of 1s in other territories within that, just to be able to collect that data. So information like that gets very vital and very important to take in, that a best of 1 strategy versus a normal strategy is very different. Now we have Mulligan in the rule set, which, again, very healthy, very content. I mean, hey, the Mulligan fixes a little bit of the struggling problems that we had. We got it a little bit sooner than JP, which I do appreciate. JP didn't get it until the start of this month. We had it an extra month early. I mean, that is not terrible in my opinion. I like that we stepped up a little bit like that. Definitely gets us thinking about different ratios, changes up the format a little bit, because Mulligan definitely changed it up what the norm was for like JP's ratio to our ratio. And then decks kind of just change pursuit that way. And then, a lot of players will talk about one of the biggest issues right now Bandai is kind of dropping the ball on, is that they are not giving enough in-person regionals. We know that store championships got hit, and I can bring that right up. Let's see, Digimon English. We have to talk about the store championships. That definitely came up as a big issue. I mean, let's get to it. Besides JP delaying another thing, but we won't get that far into it. Where's the store championships? So we finally get the information here. No invite in store championships. If I go into the comments of this 34 comments, it doesn't end well, and it doesn't act pretty is the key word here. People People are asking for, can you please give NA invites back to store championships? There's a little bit of this comes down to that there are issues with this. Is one, store championships, yes, made it a lot easier for players to get their invite, but it caused a less reliable way of getting good players in. Yes, some people will play competitive in those events, but at other times, you know, there are ways of manipulating the values into having your friends get into the nationals. Especially, all it takes is cohesion or that word. We just basically say like, hey, I will give you the winning pack because that's straight up money for your pocket. You already have your invite. I just need the invite because that's what I want. I have done that. I've done that for one of my events back in the first major round, but again, it was an agreement, but we played it out. I still won it, so I still earned my invite both times last year through store championships. Am I upset that we lost out on it? Not really, actually. I have no hate towards losing the invite and the store championships, as long as they increase the number of regionals that you can expect to see in a given time. I think that's a big problem in certain card games like this. Bandai isn't giving enough in-person events. It looks like a lot of them just went over to being online Discord events, and that is another riddle problem for a lot of players. A lot of players don't feel comfortable playing online. A lot of players are not that trusting of online players, and that is because the amount of cheating that happens. You know, we had the Dark Knight Mon player recently. You know, I'm banking on it was just a headband with cards up here, and he would just take the cards he needed, his opening hand, bring it up, and bring it right down. That's probably what happened. A lot of times that's usually what can happen to relate to something like this. And then having the ideal hand, that becomes a big problem because now ratios change, things are different, everything's not adding up. And if you have to cheat in a children's card game, you're really, really not doing well. Especially because once they get into major events, that cheating doesn't get them anywhere, to be honest with you. Once you get it, if you take the online players that are winning and take them out of the equation and put them into a real event, you can watch how high these so-called online players gets compared to their in-person events. If they get first and second all the time, or get like the top 16, top 32 very easily when they are playing in major events, but all of a sudden when they're no longer in that online, you know, retrospect where you only have this much space with a camera, you know, this little square box, all of a sudden that top tier player starts getting knocked down a few pegs. There are real players that are really good. Then you start noticing those gaps and you kind of start thinking, well, he must be cheating to be able to do this. And again, there are ways of cheating in online events more than a in-person event. Am I saying that when you go into an online event, 85% of them are cheaters? No, I'm maybe thinking like there's 15%. Maybe there are 15% out of the 500 plus players that show for the online events. There's probably that. I can't guarantee anything along those lines. So stuff like that does get on a lot of people's nerves and makes them anxious. They don't really want to play. Yes, we are finally in 2023. We have a lot of regionals, but they're all online compared to the in-persons. Canada really gets screwed over a little bit for this, and what probably might happen is that this invite system after probably December might change up to being what like everybody else had. And I'm going to be honest with you. What do I mean by this? in UK and in the South America country, all that kind of down there, those two locations, they don't actually play for invites in their regionals. They just buy into their regionals once the time comes. They don't have to earn an invite. I don't know why we have to earn an invite. Why don't you just make it so that when we want to play, we just buy the ticket and then we go to the event? I get the concept of earning it, but at this point, there's no need to earn it if you're not going to make enough player base to have that combine. Unless something is changing up and then everybody is meeting for one regionals and then worlds, but at the same time, that just doesn't make sense because we haven't had more discussion on that. But stuff like this does matter in the grand scheme of things, and we want to keep that in mind. Am I saying store championships should get their invites back? Not really. I think it's kind of was okay at one point. Do I think that we got a lot better pricing for our store championships? Oh, yes. Yes. 100% yes. Getting the alternate arts with a gold foiling for your Sistermons is really cool. Yes, it's all red, but red is just everywhere. It doesn't matter. I kind of get where you're coming from. It's nerve-wracking, but being able to give out to the top 4 prizing, which is really what most players want anyway sometimes after they have their invite. You're telling me that locals won't fire full on a store championship now just because there's no invite is a false. The problem came down to being that you originally... What was the main requirements when the first couple store championships went? First one, you had to have exactly 16 players to even activate the invite. If you had 12, that invite did not go live. So that was a big problem. People complained and made a stink about it. And guess what? Next thing they did was answer that problem the following year. Now store championships only need 8 players to fire off, which is a lot easier than most. A lot of people last year got a lot of their invites through these 8-person store championships. Is that wrong? No, it's very commonplace. So stuff like that does end up playing into factors. An 8-man requirement to get your invite is ridiculous. I think this should be 32, maybe a bigger invite cap, but force it to be larger scale events so that it's not just 3-round local, you get your invite. That's not what that should ever be. That is extremely easier. And then when it comes down to you playing in your major event, oh man, I got my invite through a store championship. Then I get my butt kicked in because, oh, I'm not really that good. That sometimes is what happens there. You know, it gets easy when you play locals because locals, you have an understanding, you know your local meta. You don't have ways of countering a large scale events meta calls because you don't know what you're walking into. Your locals will have variety. It will always have variety to a point where it's very predictable after the first couple weeks because you know what people are showing up and strolling up with. You can always go like, this man has 3 decks. Most likely it's one of these 3s, and it's going to be one of those 3s. There's not many chances that it won't be. So you already know what your 8-man local is going to be playing with. You already know what you need to bring to take them down. And that's a huge knowledge point that people don't understand that in large scale events, you don't have. You lose that accessibility because you can only go off of voice, opinions, types, you know, all this stuff that would normally affect for locals now changes up completely everything because now you can't be full on prepared for what you're going to face. So saying that the store championships needs to invite, I don't think so. At this point, taking them away was really good The problem came down to store championships didn't have pricing worth hunting for. I mean, top 4 store championship stamp cards, really cool. I like the gold boulder it's going for, everything like that. But at this point, we should have stores be able to run mini regionals as they see fit. Give stores access to this that can rent out the venues. We have plenty of stores that can pick it up. We only work with Play, TCG, you know, the core TCG, PPG, and Carta Magica. 4 major event tosses that just go with it, and then they're only doing online, which, again, I hate the judging system on online because you can't call a judge and they will appear instantly. They only have X amount of judges. They'll only appear. It takes time for them to show up. It's just not pretty. I think that's a major flaw in game design that I don't like about the online. That's like the biggest thing I hate about it, is just you can't call a judge instantly they appear. You know, now this judge might take 5 to 10 minutes to show up on their online client, and if they take that long, you need to request for them to extend your time, by the way. Just keep that in mind. If they take a judge call takes X amount of time, exceeding like a minute, and it takes 10 minutes, you need to request the judge to give a time extension, and you can counter that, because if you're losing time in a match because you're sitting there going like, well, this 10 minutes would have been quite useful, that is on the judge's fault for not arriving soon enough. But things like that are worth to keep in mind. And then one last thing about regionals. We have a good shot of maybe like 325 players showing up for an online for that in-person regional for the US plus Canada. So that's not terrible. That's plenty of space, plenty of room, right? That's a lot smaller than the 1,000 that we had last year, and I don't understand. Maybe because the venue that they're going to have to get is going to be small. I don't know. Maybe they're going to rent out an Arby's and just call it a day. Who knows? But at the end of the day, we have to take into account that we are going to probably have a very smaller nationals than we did last year. I think the fact of regionals passing the invites down, really good, really healthy. The fact of Ulti Cups don't even have events. And what do I mean by this? Ulti Cups don't have events. Ulti Cups don't have any in-person events. They're all online this year. That is a huge deterrent on a lot of players, especially since the casual format, funsy format that they create is really a breath of fresh air for a lot of players. They like to have that, and I get it. I have no objections on that. That is not my issue. Not my circus, not my clowns. So stuff like this does matter in some circumstances, but it's worth just taking due note. I think things are coming fluent enough. It's really nice. But circling back to that question at the beginning of the video that I kind of thought was really interesting to see, and I kind of just spun off from store championship issue to being, you know, the start of other questions and statements here. You know, the problem comes down to, in my opinion, for this, when the game started feeling bad is when we had delays, where a format overstayed its welcome. Looking at you, BT5. Then we got into what is known as OTK Nightmares. That was BT9. But we also had the hybrid BT7 issue. That was a big thing. We have these moments where the format's kind of healthy. It kind of spits out and changes up the playstyle a little bit. Hybrids was kind of like my jumping horse a little bit. Like, they jumped the shark a little bit on hybrids. I feel like they didn't have, the game wasn't prepared for hybrids. There wasn't enough removal. Then we got into BT8 after BT7, and there was removal for the tamers, and you know, EX2 was okay. It definitely added in some nice stuff. And then we got into BT9, that became a problem child. Then we, you know, all that kind of power creep boosted up. Then BT9 went to BT10. It just, the bans brought back BT9, EX3 was basically BT9.75, and then BT11 was okay, got a little bit different, you know, started trickling new stuff, but it was still a little bit more BT9-ish decks. We were like 9.95 at that point, and now we're finally in BT12. You know, that kind of formatting design was really bad, but I think we're kind of getting into points where they're trying new ideas, trying new mechanics, and that's going to be a problem because the constant evolving sphere that they're trying to do is either going to burn players out because they feel like every new mechanic is just causing you wanting to swap decks to that, or they're going to have to start manipulating better into design. So what do I mean by that? Make more generic, become more generic. Maybe BT14, that's what's going to happen. It's going to become very generic support. You know, decks can splash this in. The aces look like they're very generic. They're going to be able to splash into any decks with no issues. And as long as you meet condition A, B, C, you can get it done. So something worth taking a look at there. But guys, what did you think of the video? Let me know down in the comments. What is your opinions here? What is your stances? What is your feelings? Let me know down in the comments. And guys, remember, I do have a affiliate link related to Digimon. You know, the Digimon TCG with Card Trader. Definitely sign up. It doesn't cost anything to you guys, and you get $2 free on house for signing up. So it's worth taking that as worth something, you know? Guys, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you next one. Peace!